Welcome back to How Would You Beat, where we discuss how you can use jobs to be done innovation methods to beat your competition. Remember to subscribe and like this podcast. In this episode, we will look at how you could beat Apple's Vision Pro. Let's use jobs to be done analysis to see if Apple's new product, which they are describing as the most advanced personal electronic device ever, will be a success or not. A lot of the initial reviews are asking the question, what is it for? And this is where Jobs to be Done can help. We can try and answer this question today. So, Jared, I'll start with a prediction, and then we can discuss it. My prediction is that the Apple Vision will be the most successful product in history. It will generate more revenue, more profits, and more importantly, more customer satisfaction than any product humans have ever created. So, that's a big claim, given that Tony Fadell, the father of the iPod, said with consumer apps and marketing for $3,500 with 2-hour battery life, Apple has truly jumped the shark. That's what he said in a tweet Tuesday. So, big difference there. He thinks they've jumped the shark. I think it's going to be the most successful product in history. So, how do we answer this question? And what do you think?
That's a great question. So, I have a different point of view from Tony and you so far. My view is that if we could put it in a box and say you could only use it for certain jobs to be done, it would be a huge success on those jobs. But the way that it could creep in to harming other jobs I'm trying to get done in my life makes me concerned that it will either not succeed in the way that Google Glass didn't succeed, or it will succeed and make my life a little bit worse in certain parts of my life. And so let me unpack a little bit of that. So first of all, what do we mean by a job to be done? Well, we've talked about that a lot in this podcast. It's a goal that you're trying to achieve in your life. And when you struggle with that job, you look for some new solution that you might want to purchase to help you get it done better. So, Jay, what are some of the jobs that you think the Vision Pro can be helpful on?
Yeah, great. So let's discuss that, and let's also remind people that Steve Ballmer famously said no one was going to pay $600 for a phone, right, when the iPhone launched. And what he didn't get there was that no one was buying a phone. You were buying a solution to lots of jobs that you need to get done while mobile. It was a platform for getting jobs done by mobile. So let's talk about first, what is the Vision Pro as a platform? It's virtual reality when you're fully immersed, but it's also augmented reality. And Apple's, of course, calling this spatial computing. So what would you do with spatial computing? Well, let me just state a fundamental part of human life. We are 3D. We live in a 3D world. We are 3D people. The fact that we spend all this time using documents and creating content and absorbing information and using that information to achieve goals in two-dimensional space is very, very, very odd. It is something that didn't happen over the millions of years that we evolved. We just found ourselves needing to get these jobs done and using tools that were in two-dimensional space. So humans are 3D. So almost every job that you can get done in two-dimensional space can be done better in three-dimensional space. So let's take a first example, very basic, that's been around since the success of the personal computer, was just Office documents, right? The suite of PowerPoint presentations, spreadsheets, and word processing, those really were the killer apps that created the PC before the internet. And then, of course, what happened with the internet is we now connected that information to people could now share that information. They could connect, they could collaborate in ways. Of course, we're having this conversation over the internet, right? So it enabled that type of collaboration in real time with humans, which is obviously why the internet was incredibly successful as well. That information can now flow around. But I think people were just so constrained to this two-dimensional thinking, and the way that we get a job done is to pull up a Word document and start typing something, or to take a spreadsheet and put in columns and rows of data and then try and use a pivot table to look at it. It's just every single thing you're trying to accomplish with those solutions is going to be done better and faster and more accurately in three-dimensional space. Now, let me also start by, I think we've got to criticize Apple for some things they did on launch. I do think they got some messaging off the mark, but and that main messaging that I think they missed is showing how jobs can get done better in two-dimensional space, and they did it. There were some
You mean
brief
in three-dimensional space, right?
sorry, in
Yeah.
three-dimensional space. Yeah, there were some brief moments they did it where they had, which is just extraordinary, where someone sends it's a design that's in 3 dimension for a space, and it comes through your text message, and then it pops out in front of you in 3 dimensions.
Hmm.
It's hard to demo that on a 2 dimensional screen. How extraordinary it's going to look, and that really that's an example of how you're going to get jobs done better in 3 dimensional space. Even research, if you're researching a book and using text, I have a application called Ulysses that I've been keeping information and building a thesis with it forever, and it's just hard to find the information and make all those connections. Be able to do that in 3 dimensional space. And of course, if you're designing a product, if you're building, if you're trying to do drug discovery, if you're learning how to do surgery, any sort of educational, I mean, the list goes on. Almost every single job humans do is going to be done better in 3 dimensional space. So I think we could go through this, in detail, job by job. But what Apple was doing was establishing that this platform is going to enable humans to do this stuff better, and they chose to present it as in a way that I think it is smart initially, is that you're going to be so comfortable in this space because all the apps you're currently using on your Mac and your iPhone and your iPad are already in it. And I think people aren't fully grasping yet that it is a Mac, it is an iPhone, it is an iPad. Those are those two-dimensional systems are within the three-dimensional space of Vision OS. And I'll also say that people really need to experience this. The reviews, I have not demoed it yet, of course, but
Yep.
the reporters who have seen it, it is indistinguishable from reality. That is so extraordinarily powerful that you are living. And I've been using VR for a long time. I've been thinking about VR since the 80s when I was in college. There was a big book that came out, and everybody, when I was in college, was very excited. This is going to be extraordinary, and then of course nothing happened with it for years because the technology wasn't there yet. I mean, effectively, this is all happening because of processing speed and camera technology and lenses and screens, et cetera. And the breakthroughs that the inventions, just the technological inventions in this thing are just extraordinary. And so that, I think anybody who walks into an Apple store, puts this thing on, is going to walk out just salivating and wanting to be in this space, because it's an enhancement to your existing space, of course. That's just extraordinary to be able to have the amount of documents and applications and connection and information and explanation. It's just so much better when, and this is what I think people can't grasp, because we have things like the Quest Pro and Meta trying to do this with these crazy cartoon avatars, and VR today kind of looks cartoonish.
Hmm.
I do spend time in VR just as a hobby, but I don't think people have grasped, and you really can't grasp it until you put the thing on. The fact that reporters were fooled into thinking that they actually felt the butterfly land on their finger in 3D. This has been reported out, that some of the reporters who saw the demo, there's a demo I'm sure people have read about, where a butterfly comes through this virtual window and lands on your finger. First of all, the fact that butterfly is an algorithm that knows where your finger is, and
It's pretty amazing.
it's pretty amazing. And John Gruber at Daring Fireball had this amazing moment where, and there's also a dinosaur that comes through a window, and it's so close to your face, and it's so realistic, you cannot tell that there's any pixels. It looks like a dinosaur. It is literally
Right.
indistinguishable from reality. He said his lizard brain, of course, was terrified because it looked like this, predator about to eat him. So I don't think people understand the quality of this yet, which is going to be extraordinary.
Yeah, I watched the promotional video that Apple put together, and for me, I haven't dabbled in VR very much. I've used a couple of friends' headsets to play some games. I found the experience disorienting, isolating, and honestly a little bit boring. And so I haven't spent much time in VR at all. And so I wasn't really comparing what Apple was promoting to other VR solutions. I was looking at it and thinking, what could this help me do in life? And I thought they did a nice job of demonstrating that. So there was a scene where in this video where they have somebody on a plane who's trying to isolate themselves from the noise and the environment of a plane. There's a baby crying a few aisles behind them, and they're watching a movie on this enormous virtual screen and feeling completely immersed in that. And I watched that and thought, yes, I definitely want that. That would be way better than my current experience of on a plane. And everybody I've talked to is like, oh yeah, that's an incredible use case. Like the job of like get through a flight, you know, happily is very hard to do. And that's a good solution to it. And so I think they did a nice job of taking it away from like the gaming space, and kind of what I would, gaming is a huge market, but kind of niche for me, and putting it into the context of real life and things that you were trying to do before VR ever existed, and saying, here's a way to do that better.
Yeah, and I think that's critical. I definitely agree with that, and I think having Bob Iger on the stage was just a massive mistake. No one's going to pay $3,500 for a 100-foot TV movie screen. That I think just enables naive critics to say, "Oh my gosh, this is a $3,500 like movie projector." And in fact, one of the reviewers even said that in the demo session, they said, well, how is a family going to watch a movie together on this? And they were like, well, a family could buy 4 of them. I mean, that's an unforced messaging error. No
Yeah.
one's, no one's going to pay, $13,000-$14,000 for their kids to watch, Disney movies, for a family
Well,
of
even if
4,
they do,
right?
it can get in the way of getting that particular job done, right? Like sitting down with your family where you can see each other's faces and be in physical connection with each other while you experience entertainment. The job there is like have a fulfilling moment and connect with your family. And these headsets can totally get in the way of that. So
Oh,
I think it's actually
I do
not
kind of
quite good at
disagree
that.
with I do disagree with that a little bit. I think eventually the price will come down. It'll be a $1,000 product, and then you will start to have people like hang out and watch a movie together. While
Well, I
they're
think regardless of the price, you still have that headset in your way, right? Like when I watch TV with my family, my children snuggle me, right? And
yeah
that's really the reason I'm doing it, is because their face can be next to mine and we're in
yeah, but
physical
but
connection,
this is what
and that's the
I think.
job.
This is what I think. This is where I think Apple's messaging missed the mark. I don't think people are going to watch TV. I think we are at the end of TV because I mean certainly people are going to watch TV, but I would be really surprised if Apple. The reason Apple got into Apple TV and started making TV shows is because they're going to make three-dimensional experiences. I mean, maybe you call it 3D TV, but I just think when humans are actually in a three-dimensional space together with other humans, it changes entirely. Why I don't want to sit there. I mean, certainly there's still some great movies, and they showed Avatar, but it's in a rectangle box being 3D. That's just the first version. The next version of Avatar, whenever you create the narrative, you are going to be in the three-dimensional environment. It's like they showed with sports. You're sitting at the NBA courtside in the three-dimensional world. That is just going to change the way people tell stories. We have been limited to the rules of filmmaking for so long. In fact, I think filmmaking has jumped the shark. I mean, I went and saw one of those new Marvel movies,
Yeah.
with my kids. It's just insane. The experience was just, and maybe I'm just obviously an old guy, but it just to me seemed, of course, the narrative of humans, the villain and the hero, and overcoming it. There's always that, but
Yeah.
I don't think people have fully grasped yet, in the way that it would have been really hard to grasp, what was going to happen with the personal computer and the mobile phone. the societal impact and the way it's going to change what we create and consume. So let's
Yeah,
just
well,
take.
so I'm not suggesting that the job there is to watch TV, actually. And I think that you might be right that like TV as it stands today might go away. I'm suggesting that there's a job of connecting with family, which is hard to do, and find quality time with them that doesn't take a ton of effort. And if we do that through the headset, it could make that job a lot worse. And so we're going to end up, and Apple showed a few examples in their demo where it was like you're with your family and you're taking pictures through the headset, and where you could experience them in real life. And that's where I go, I want to put this thing in a box for only certain jobs
Well,
around work and content consumption. And I don't want it to get into my family life.
I do agree that I think that was a mistake of showing the the dad taking a 3D recording, because what I think is going to happen is they're going to put a 3D camera on your iPhone. You're just it's the iPhone, the width of the iPhone is bigger than the distance between my pupils. So I think theoretically you can build a 3D camera in the iPhone. So you're going to shoot the images there. You're going to experience them on obviously in the Vision, because you can't see it in 3D on your
Right.
phone. So I think that was a little bit of a mistake, and there was some criticism about that. Yeah, like you're going to be staring at your kids. Now, I think practically you're going to be sitting around the living room doing work in your 3-dimensional space, and you may just be like, oh, there my kid is doing something. Take a photo while you've got the thing on. And I do think the eyes are extraordinary. The ability to have someone's eyes facing out, and the idea that you're seeing through it, so that you really are enhancing the world. So I agree that there are use cases like gaming, which is very, very interesting, a big market and full immersion, and you'll go into some crazy spaces and play games and simulations. But the practicality of it, the reason it actually is going to be, I think, a very, very successful pro product, and people are forgetting they actually are targeting it initially at the pro market, people who make money with their computers, which is, of course, an
A lot of
enormous
people.
amount of people. In fact, developers, Apple just announced, have been paid out $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion from the app stores, which
Amazing.
is just extraordinary. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
percentage of the a big percentage of the GDP, which is $20 trillion in the U.S.,
Right.
give or take. So and that is because applications are so useful. And the reason I think the Vision Pro and just the Vision platform is going to be so big is all of those jobs are done so much better in 3D. They are done more efficiently. They are done more accurately. They're done more collaboratively. Just think of it, anything that you're trying to accomplish that requires information and collaboration. So you're designing a building, you're designing a product, you're designing software, right? Software is 3 dimensions of data. We just like represent it on a scrolling piece of paper, but that's not the way software is architected. It's literally multidimensional. And this is true of spreadsheets and data and business information. It's true of medical information. It's true of everything in the world is actually even more multidimensional. We're just stuck trying to represent it on these 2-dimensional interfaces, occasionally with a 3-dimensional, rendering in a 2-dimensional interface. And
Yeah.
that is not the way humans work. And
I think it's worth pausing on that for a
Yeah.
second and with a couple of examples, because I think that's a not easily understood concept out of the gate. So if you think about, I happen to have, a HubSpot dashboard open over here on my other monitor,
Yep.
and it's full of bar charts and line charts, all representing 2 dimensions. One might be revenue over time, or it might be qualified leads over time. And it's very, very hard to get a third dimension in that. And there's, management consulting is widely considered to be using 2x2s all over the place, right? It's always 2-dimensional. How do you get 2 dimensions represented in a visual? And what you end up doing to understand something about your business is you look at 5 or 6 of those 2-dimensional charts. And if you can decrease the number of charts, because you can add a third dimension to each of those charts, additional data to understand the relationships between various things that are happening in your business. For example, if you could look at leads and revenue over time on the same chart in a way that was a little bit more advanced, or do funnel analysis, or anything that you want to understand that includes multiple data points and multiple dimensions, it can become easier if you're actually doing it in 3D.
Yeah, yeah, and this is why databases are so powerful. And obviously, Oracle became one of the most valuable companies in history because of databases, and it's because we all have this enormous amount of data that is helping us get things done. Whether it's your personal, professional, or medical lives. The data is a crucial input into making decisions. And you're right, we just display it in these two-dimensional pie charts. We put it on 200-page PowerPoint presentations. That's really crazy way to represent it, but we don't have the choice. There is no way to show it in 3D, and it's actually multi-dimensional. So let's just take, you have one lead who's you're looking at in your marketing platform, but that lead has, customer needs, they've got competitors, they've got to think they're using, they may be considering, you've got more information about them, how are they connected to you, all that information. You're kind of switching back between these tabs to figure out, okay, where is it? And then you're looking for this information. You can't see a complete picture and immediately navigate to the piece of information that you need, which you can obviously do just so much better in 3D, because you could have 14 different directions of data represented in three-dimensional space.
Yeah.
And of course, developers are going to have to build these applications, and that's what Apple was really doing. They launched this at a developer conference to get developers excited about it, to then have the launch 6 months from now, when they have a bunch of applications that developers have built that really show the power of just being in a three-dimensional space. John Gruber even mentioned, which I thought was amazing, someone at Apple had been using the Vision for a while, testing it out, and they kind of represented their Mac desktop with a bunch of stuff in front of them, like it's like they're still constrained, like they had a few big monitors in front of them. And it really took the reconceptualize, wait a second, I don't have to be stuck in this two-dimensional world. I can have my documents all around me in 360 degrees. So it'll take time for us to adjust to that, but then there will be no going back. This is what happened with the GUI, the graphical user interface. Everybody went from DOS text-based, whether it was the Apple II Plus or DOS, everybody moved to GUIs. There is no non-GUI operating system, and maybe Linux, but from a successful, popular use cases, there are no non-GUI interfaces.
Right.
And that's happened with multi-touch in mobile. There are no successful non-touch, non-multi-touch interfaces, in the world for mobile, just because it is a better user experience. It saves you time with that interface. And that's what I think the Vision Pro, we still haven't seen how extraordinarily powerful it's going to be when these applications are natively built for 3 dimensions. Of course, and Apple even showed, hey, here's Microsoft Office in 3D. That I don't think is interesting. I mean, yes, I get that it's a platform now. It subsumes the Mac. Instead of using your Mac, you can use the application, within Vision OS. You don't need a Mac at all. It is a Mac. It's an M2 chip that is in my current MacBook. It will run those applications and iPad applications as well. So, and also it just seems to be an extraordinary experience. You literally can look through it while you're wearing it and look at your phone to check something on your phone. That is truly extraordinary. I don't think people realize yet that what they're doing is a camera taking a picture of the incredibly high resolution of your phone and rendering it on a screen in 3D that you're looking at, and it's indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah. So I think we've established that the technological capabilities of this platform have yet to be fully realized.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that everybody's grappling with right now is, what's the business case for the way they came to market? Right. That's really the criticism that's being laid on them right now. Like, how can they expect to get this price point with a 2-hour battery life, where you're like, there's all these consumption problems with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth spending a minute on that. Why? Because you and I talk about this every day. Why the market is much bigger than people realize, and why the Steve Ballmer laughing at the price of the iPhone was a mistake. But let's pause on that for a second,
Yeah,
right?
great.
So what are people paying for? It's a new product category, right? So to say like, well, they should pay a comparable price to what they pay for Quest is the typical move, right? What are the other VR headsets priced at? Well, we should probably price in the realm of that. And Apple threw that out the window. They
Yeah.
just went way beyond. So why is that a good move, and how are they able to do that?
Yeah, ironically, Tony Fadell is an example we use all the time to describe this. You would think he would have grasped this, but obviously not. Because when Nest launched, we use this example all the time. The thermostat market was, $30 for a thermostat that everybody hated, and the HVAC contractor installed it on your wall. And Nest came out and said, "Well, we're going to almost 10 times that. We're going to sell a thermostat for $250." Well, it's because no one's buying a thermostat; they're buying getting the job done of achieving comfort in their home efficiently and with cost savings. So that's why the Nest was, very, very successful. Obviously, the same concept applies here, which is and this is where I think Apple did miss the messaging mark. I think the product is absolutely extraordinary, but the messaging they missed was they should have shown, here's what it takes for an architect to design and engineer a building. And you're using AutoCAD, you're in 2D, you meet with the client, you try and describe how this 2D image is going to work, and you can just, the demo writes itself. But instead, right now, you're literally designing the whole thing in 3D. This two-dimensional representation of an architectural space becomes 3D. It just lifts off the page. And if you want to move a wall, if you need to move an HVAC unit, if you have to re-engineer the construction because you change the windows, it's just literally like calculating that, in real time. And that and you apply that to anything, right? They did show some of this stuff, obviously, like the heart, learning about, a heart and biology. I mean, unfortunately, like no
Yeah,
students are going to buy this initially, so it's not really
the main
education
message
marketers.
I got was it was targeted at executives who travel a lot, right? So they showed an executive in a hotel room managing teams of people, and they had this tiny laptop, but they needed to actually get real productivity, and so they blew up the Vision Pro into
Yeah,
multiple screens in their hotel room. And I was like, I could see an executive paying $3,500 for that, charging it to the business. That seems like a good segmentation to me.
yeah, no, no, absolutely, and clearly, like it is a way better experience to be on an airplane, traveling for business, and be in a hotel room trying to do business where you're in a different space. But I don't think that fully captures. I get why they're doing that. It's a very relatable problem. I'm in a horrible space that I don't want to be in for hours. I'm stuck on this plane or whatever. I'm stuck in
Yeah,
this
and
hotel room.
there's a segment that's likely to be an early adopter that has the willingness to pay to solve those use cases.
Yeah,
My father's an architect, so just that anecdotal experience, they tend to be pretty late adopters and not have a huge willingness to pay because they're not super profitable. So when you think about like who is going to buy out of the gate, I like that traveling executive segment.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's fine. But long term, the reason I think it's going to be the most profitable product in history is I think you should short the airline stocks and commercial real estate, because the type of travel that's very profitable airlines also is, of course, business travel, where someone just has to buy a ticket, it's paid for by their company, it's full fare, high margin. That just having to travel around to do, already you saw this post COVID and with Zoom. And of
Yeah.
course, we've talked about this with Zoom, forever. Even before COVID, we said the airlines should buy Zoom. And now, of course, Zoom's, market value is more than the airlines
Right.
because it is way more effective and it's faster and more accurate to do a Zoom call than it is to, put a team on a plane and have them all travel around to, meet. So, I think that'll happen. So I think, yes, the experience of being in a horrible plane where you're just sitting there for hours going to some, work meeting is a use case. But I think the more powerful use case is you don't have to take that flight. that the being in the space in 3D with people that you're trying to collaborate with means you don't have to take that flight, and you don't have to have a desk. You don't have to sit at an office in this way that constrains you to this two-dimensional space looking at a two-dimensional screen. I have to go back to, I don't think people it's, and this is, I think, generally my criticism of a lot of business thinking is it doesn't factor in evolution. The state that we're in today, where we just look at these screens and, we're staring at phones, which obviously has like, there's positives and negatives. This is, we stare at all these machines because that's where the money is. Capital has made us sit in front of a desk, chained to a computer, typing stuff in, and our phones, because that's where the money is. And I get that. But it is a very, very odd thing for humans. If you were an alien species, you said, oh, there's this species and they roam around the planet. They have these legs and these arms and these opposable thumbs, and they can climb trees, and they're, moving around all the time in these groups. And then wait a second, they all now just sit in front of these computer screens all day long. You would think that what happened to these species? It's almost like, like the chickens, we put them in these factory farms. Now a chicken just sits in a cage until it, gives us eggs and dies, and we eat it. The chicken has an absolutely horrible life. In some ways, this is true of humans. We're not moving around in three-dimensional space. We're not collaborating in three-dimensional space. We're all stuck to these computer screens. This is going to be so liberating. It will get jobs done better, but even just as an interface level, as a way to exist throughout the workday, I am going to switch 100% sitting in front of my Mac to sitting in the Vision Quest. And the 2-hour battery life, I think, massively misses the point. First of all, this is the most solvable thing in the world. You want 4 hours?
Yeah.
Have a bigger battery. I mean, that is not an issue. The fact that it can be battery operated at all is an extraordinary milestone.
Right.
And you practically, you're going to be in the space sitting somewhere. You don't have to be at a desk, right? You could literally be anywhere, and you're probably going to be near an outlet since you're going to be indoors, most likely. And so you just plug the thing in. It's really simple. And then because it's 2 hours, that gives you 2 hours to walk around in any space, to experience the space you're in with all of the documents, the information, the collaboration, whatever you're trying to do. You can then liberate yourself, stand up and walk around. I mean, everybody's touting how great it is to have a stand-up desk. You should not have to stand up. You should be able to walk around. It's to be able to walk around the OS, the interface, the environment, in order to get jobs done, to look at data, to analyze information, to make decisions, to learn new skills. I mean, we haven't really touched on education yet, but the skills you're going to be able to learn and the speed at which you're going to be able to absorb information. I mean, just think about learning geometry. We all stared at geometry textbooks and now geometry iPad apps. It's going to be extraordinary to experience geometry, physics, biology, chemistry in 3 dimensions, computer programming. I know I'm now.
I was going to say that I think the other way to read the story they were telling about the executive on the plane and then in a hotel room and still getting things done was not necessarily that they were taking a drudgery trip to a meeting, but maybe they were going to Fiji because they just want to hang out there. And they didn't need their giant workstation with them. They could still be productive without bringing 4 monitors, and all their keyboards and doing all that stuff. So I think that liberation story is part of the messaging.
Yeah.
And I agree about the battery issue. I think that's a solvable problem. That's like saying Tesla's not going to be valuable because they couldn't sort out their manufacturing straight out of the gate at volume, right?
Yeah.
That it misses the point of the platform long term.
Yeah.
The thing that that gives me hesitation that this is going to be a huge home run and take over everything, or it might even do that and I might still be upset, is the potential isolation factor. And I like that they saw that as a potential issue and created the screen, the OLED on the outside of the device, so that you can see somebody's quote unquote face. It's not actually their face. It's a rendering of their face on a screen. So they have that in mind, that they're trying to connect you through this device. And I hope they keep pushing it to the point where it's like the device basically disappears to some degree, because I do think the isolation and loneliness issues we're facing as a society right now are pretty big. And if everybody were to buy this at some point and try to use it all the time, we could end up with a lot of issues there.
Yeah, well, that's such a great topic to discuss. I do agree. I mean, and obviously, it'll hopefully shrink over time.
Yeah.
Right, where it looks like a pair of glasses more than goggles. I mean, that might be a ways off. I mean, just the computing power, you'd have to reduce the chip size by an enormous amount. But maybe they move the chip to the battery pack or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are ways to do it. I do think if you look today, I mean, just watching my kids and their kids, the number of times that they're hanging out together, staring at their phones. They are
Yeah.
together technically, physically, but they are staring at their phone. It's horrible.
Totally
It
agree.
is horrible, and
Yeah.
we've kept them off social networks, just given all the damage that social networks can do. And I've gotten off social networks. I use them for business, but even then, it's hard to be on Twitter. I tried to filter it to be business oriented stuff. It's just horrible. There's so much horrible stuff on it. And of course, you can look at Twitter and TikTok and YouTube in your 3-dimensional space. And so it could be a problem. And of course, humans have figured out a way to be horrible in whatever medium has ever
Right.
emerged. So,
Right.
but I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful that being in a 3-dimensional space connected with someone, it's really hard to be with another human and just be really confrontational. Now, it happens all the time, of course. I mean, we have a democracy. There's freedom of speech. People, two sides show up in real life and get really mad. January 6th happened.
Yeah.
There's road rage. People just get upset and mad and angry all the time. But I think the isolation factor, and it's really interesting what they're doing with personas, avatars, whatever you want to call them, the kind of 3D rendering of yourself when you're two people with a Vision Pro can see each other rendered in 3D, which is pretty interesting. It seems
Yep.
reviews are like it's definitely not as bad as Meta's, crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you could imagine getting there, though.
Yeah,
and for the purposes of a video conference being better than what we do today.
Yeah. I think it could get better really quick. And of course, people forget the M series chip is just extraordinary. It's getting so fast. So we're at the M2, and we're at M5. It's going to be kind of mind-boggling how fast.
Yeah.
And also the fact that they built another chip called the R1. I know this is more the technical, implementations, but it gets the job done, right? Those things make it indistinguishable from reality, which I still don't think people have fully grasped, like what it means to be in a 3-dimensional space that looks like the space you're in, but it's not real. It is an image of the space that you're in. It's so extraordinary. So that isolation, because people, I think it'll be better to collaborate with people, and even just to hang out. I think the ability to immerse yourself by moving the crown in, a lake, a mountainside lake, is, it's just extraordinary to transport yourself, Star Trek style, into another environment with another person. Right. That, I think, is you'll be on your own initially until you have friends who have it. And again, the price is going to come down. It's going to be business use case initially and wealthy people who buy it because it's interesting. But the big market is going to be down when it's $1,000, and it will come down in price as they scale it and get to manufacturing volumes. And I just think what will happen in those 3-dimensional spaces will be incredible collaboration, and that will hopefully reverse what I do think is a very, very bad trend with our current devices of creating division and animosity. Now there are also real problems that we need to solve. Half the country only has $400 their name, so they're immediately not in this market, right? So that's another issue. But but brings up something that I think is very interesting as well, is what are the new applications that get jobs done better, that create more employment and more opportunity for more developers and companies and employees to make more money in a three-dimensional space. And that is really extraordinarily interesting to think about, because already, of course, they paid out $1.1 trillion to app developers, but that's a lot
Right.
of people being employed and making money. And one thing I think they missed is the messaging should have been more profits for more people. Now, they wouldn't say it that way,
Hmm.
but they should have done a better job in the messaging of showing how working and collaborating in this three-dimensional space people are going to be willing to pay for solutions that get jobs done better in this platform natively, not just porting apps from the two-dimensional world. And sure, it's a Mac in 3D it's a giant monitor, with lots of
Yeah.
screens, but that doesn't capture the power of operating in a three-dimensional space.
I think that's a great point, and really helpful lens through which to think about your life as a developer on this platform. So I've now lived through working in tech when the iPhone launched and when the Apple Watch launched, and so these are the new platforms where, as a developer, you think I better build something for that. And the first move for almost everybody is to say, how do I recreate my existing functionality in this new interface, this new interaction paradigm? And I think that is the wrong question. I think the right question is, what part of the job that I'm trying to get done with my product is really difficult because of the existing platform? So, I'm HubSpot and I'm trying to help people generate leads. What's still really hard
Yeah.
because of desktop interfaces and mobile phone interfaces, or I'm Adobe, or and I'm trying to help people edit video. Like, what is really hard because of the platform that I'm introducing to my customers to do that on, and how might those unmet needs be solved extraordinarily differently in this new platform, and build those features first, and then build in all the other stuff that you can do today relatively easily in the existing platform.
Yeah,
And I
and
think
this is
those are the breakthroughs.
I definitely agree. And I think a good example of where Apple missed the mark in the messaging was the surfboard designer. They had this infomercial they played, and the dad, like hanging out with his kids, but he's clearly a surfboard designer. So he's in the Apple Vision Pro and he's designing a surfboard in the Vision Pro using a two-dimensional application. He's literally looking at
Right.
two-dimensional uh, sketches of a surfboard, which is a 3D product in a 3D environment. That's a miss. That what they should have shown is he pulls up the file. It's a two-dimensional representation of the surfboard, and then he pulls the surfboard out into three-dimensional space in 3D and puts his kid on it. Like
Right.
kid didn't have the Vision Pro on, but the idea is that then, okay, I need to design this surfboard. What does the texture look like? What is it? Is it made of fiberglass? If I change this dimension, is it structurally going to work? And he literally could be doing that all in 3D with his hands, right?
Right.
That's so extraordinary as
Yes.
literally meaning it leaps off the page into three-dimensional space. And they did show a little bit of this, but and I get that they're trying to sell the idea of the platform to developers. Really, this was targeted at developers. It's targeted at the world, so we all see what this
Yeah.
thing is. But they really want the developers to make these applications, come to life, as you would say.
Yeah.
And I think they missed the mark a little bit on that, because it just made naive critics be able to say like, oh my God, who's gonna watch a
Right.
100-foot movie?
Right. I think that the physical object design is a great example of a job that's you could imagine building something different for as a developer. I think another example is retail, right? If I'm a developer or a product manager at a retail company that sells a lot of clothing, I'm immediately thinking like, how can I build something on that platform that helps people try things on and get a real sense of fit? Because that is the hardest thing to do through e-commerce right now. returns are at an all-time high and causing major issues in profitability. So how could you enable somebody to get a true sense of fit? And now it's not going to be that your entire market is going to have this device tomorrow, and so it's not going to jack up sales immediately.
Yeah.
But you want to put yourself in that position where you're helping a key segment. So especially if you're a high-end retailer selling to these executives that Apple's marketing to right now, how do you help those people try things on and see if something fits in that 3D space?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me, I just thought of something that I think is a good demonstration of the power of this when it gets adopted and you can build things for it. So let's just take a book, right? We're so used to books. Books have obviously been around since the Gutenberg printing press, and books are essential to our society. It's libraries. We're even having a huge debate about what books you're allowed to read. Today, unfortunately, and just foundational part of what it means to be humans. Books, knowledge. So I've been reading my cousin and author Stephen Johnson, who's been on our podcast. He has great books for young readers. One is Extra Life, How we got Extra Life, and then How We Got to Now. Both incredible books. Highly recommend them. So I'm reading these books to my children at night. Fascinating stuff. So we just did a chapter on glass, and he's talking about how extraordinary it is that the history of glass, and is describing an observatory in Hawaii that looks out into space, and it's a system of mirrors, just totally incredible. And he's an extraordinary author. I love reading to them, so fine. But if you were to create that book today, what you would do is you would be reading about the text, and then you would immediately leap off into actually experiencing how this thing works to look out into space. And then you would travel to the planet that you're looking at and describe what it's like to look at Jupiter or Mars, or a black hole, right? And this is true, even in Extra Life. He had these amazing stories about the guy who contributed enormous amounts to car safety because he put himself in this crazy jet sled that went 650 miles an hour and stopped in a second and a half. It was insane that he survived. But you could imagine, okay, you get in the sled. You want to see what that feels like to go 650 miles and stop in a second. Now, thankfully, it's physically not going to injure you, but that experience, it's human. We're describing these things in 2 dimensions because we don't have a way to experience them in 3 dimensions. The best we had was movies. You could take a movie of it or a photograph, right? Moving from the photograph to the movie to the 3-dimensional element. And this is also what I think is extraordinary. Apple's creating a new type of file system for storing this. I think this is accurate, of storing this 3-dimensional information. They even created custom cameras to make these environments, because you have to go out with some sort of 3D camera and capture it. You can't just like laser scan it and try and render it. They're actually capturing the 3-dimensional video experience. And I'll make a prediction. Apple is doing that for every single square inch of the planet, or at least, major cities and major roads and state parks. Tim Cook has state parks in his Twitter bio. So, he clearly loves them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they launch with major state parks rendered in 3D throughout the entire state park that you can visit in the Apple Vision Pro. Just, instantaneously you're at Yellowstone and you're just experiencing in absolutely stunning realism. And then I bet on top of that file type, they're then going to enable developers to build something in Yellowstone. So if you wanted to build a game, or if you wanted to build, an environment, or you wanted to have people interact with Yellowstone and characters in Yellowstone in this, augmented and virtual reality together, it'll be an incredibly new file type. So how do you edit that if you're a developer, right? How do you edit these 3D files and make these 3D experiences in the same way that we needed to edit, music and television? We need to figure out all those tools when those mediums came about. This 3-dimensional medium is going to need those types of tools. And I thought that was funny too. They show like Final Cut Pro and Logic, their video editing and music editing apps in 2 dimensions in the Apple Vision Pro. But we're stuck with those metaphors literally because of film and tape, and analog film and tape. We still have this vision of music that, it's this 2-dimensional thing that's just audio over time. but music is 3 dimensions, and so is video, because you've got all these different elements that are going on. For example, in music, you have like compression and equalization, and and audio actually is over time. It's frequency over time and amplitude. So it is a 3-dimensional
Yeah.
thing that we're experiencing. Obviously, music travels through the air, it gets to your ears, through 3 dimensions. So we're stuck. We can't even get out of these old metaphors. Even Apple didn't show like a 3-dimensional version of Logic and Final Cut Pro, and I get why they want to say it's seamless. Now you're working in this environment, you're still using the tools that you know and
Right.
love and are using. But the next generation, the big opportunity is to stop restricting ourselves to these 2-dimensional environments, because those are artificial constraints and they're not humans. Humans are 3D.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I have, for all the ways in which the platforms are better than what we're tethered to today, there are things like, oh, you get a perfect rendering of Yellowstone. And the day my kids say we don't have to ever go to Yellowstone because I've got this perfect rendering in my headset, is a day I'm going to be really sad. So there's like, I have this like incredible mix of emotions of like excitement about how my workday might be better, and fear about how people won't need to go into physical environments anymore. And we will miss that. And it's hard to articulate what the missing piece will be. But I have a feeling if we don't get out into nature a lot and experience these things, because the substitutes seem to be as good and we don't know how good it could be, we'll miss something important. That's where I go.
I'm not worried about that. I really am not concerned about that. Given the concern I have today, that people are staring at their phones all day long and getting angry and suicidal, and
Yeah,
literally suicide rates are up for teenage girls to an alarming amount. And as the father of teenage girls, I can't tell you how concerning that is. So
totally.
maybe they then switch from being in their phone to being in their Vision Pros, and it becomes all terrible, and they're just it's even worse.
Right.
I'm hopeful because I do think it's so much more human. It really is human to be in these 3-dimensional spaces. And sure, you should take your kids to Yellowstone, but also remember, most people cannot travel to most places in the world. And if most people in the world travel to most places in the world, we haven't figured out how to solve that carbon problem. we really want people taking fewer flights. We still have not figured out how. That's the one area that we do not have the technology yet to reduce carbon. And you get on a plane, it's incredibly bad for the planet. I mean, planes are obviously. I'm a pilot. I love flying. Now I do fly gliders, which don't have an engine, but it's flying is we cannot keep increasing the amount that people are flying. So
Totally
it doesn't mean
true.
you shouldn't go visit places, but it's also extraordinary. I mean, that's actually a great example. One of the jobs that's going to get done is visit a space, a place that you've never been to that you wanted to visit. Well, what's the cost of going from California to France? I mean, most Californians can't do that flight. And at any price, it's really expensive. But you could certainly do it in a Vision Pro and go visit Paris and experience what it's like to be in Paris. I mean, it's just it's such an enhancement to human experience to be able to be in 3-dimensional spaces that are indistinguishable from reality. I don't think, I'm going to keep saying this again and again, I don't think people can really judge the Vision Pro until they've walked into an Apple store and put it on and seen it in action.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. If I couldn't travel to go experience something, before I had social media and all these things, I'd go over to a friend's house or meet in a park, or spend time with people in physical space. And there are a lot of studies out recently where people said that's incredibly healthy, and people are doing it less and less today. And so if we're making these incredible experiences in a headset so powerful, will that trend continue, is kind of the question. Will people spend even more time alone in their headsets, or just virtually experiencing things together? And what is the effect of that?
Well, I've been thinking about this nonstop. I mean, I spent a lot of time in VR already, just as one of my hobbies. But I've been thinking about VR for a long time, and obviously since Monday's launch, I've been thinking about it nonstop as to figure out what jobs it's going to get done, what are the kind of market opportunities from it, obviously, and just whether or not it'll be successful. And what am I going to do with it? So let me give you an example. I am going to spend every minute that I have to work outside. I'm going to go into that full immersion space because I sit in my office and I look at a Mac and, my phone occasionally all day long. And I'm on Zoom calls, like I have a pretty standard knowledge worker job, sitting in front of my computer all day in an office, I have a window, which is nice. A lot of people don't have windows, right? Meaning an actual physical window they look out into. So that's going to change immediately. I love being outside. I think it's human. Obviously, there's lots of studies that we need to get outside. And that's just hard to do. You can't take your Mac for all sorts of reasons. It's, sitting in the sun is bad,
I try to do it with my AirPods and take calls walking around, but then the wind picks up and the noise cancellation's good, but not perfect. And it doesn't totally work.
Yeah. So I'm going to sit outside, all day long. The vast majority of the time I'm working, I'm going to be outside. That is going to be just heavenly. And more human. I'm going to sit by a mountain lake, the one of the images had the woman sitting in a desert. I thought that was funny. I was like, wait, look, maybe it was a big beach, but it was like tons of sand. I will not be hanging out there. I like forests and mountains and streams. And so, but hey, your preference, right? What do you like? Or in a city, right? You literally could be sitting in a cafe in Paris and just people are walking around you,
right,
all the time. It's crazy to think about. So I think that's going to reconnect people to nature, reconnect them to wanting to take off the Vision Pro and hang out with actual humans and just remember how extraordinary it is to be in 3 dimensions. We think it's normal to sit there and scroll through Twitter or TikTok all day. It's it's horrible. We have to find some.
So I like this idea. I like this idea that it gets us outside in the first place because it releases us from the tether of our workstation, and because we're out in space, we at some point we'll take it off and look at all these people around. Maybe I'll interact with them.
Yes.
Hopefully my battery's dead.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't think the implications of it have really reverberated yet with a bunch of the critics. Just in terms of the functional applications, we always call them functional jobs, of course, whether you're designing something, you're engineering something, you're architecting something, you're learning something new, et cetera. And of course, gaming and entertainment are just going to be, really interesting as well. Once they're all fully 3D all the time, there isn't even a category yet. I mean, there are some VR, games and, you can watch movies in VR, but I just don't think, that's even started to the innovations that are going to happen there are going to be extraordinary at this level of quality and realism. But so I think it's going to be a very, 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 very successful product. And what I think as well is every VR company now, whether it's Microsoft, HP, Meta, Pimax, some of the startups, every single one of them is right now having a product planning meeting, changing their roadmap. They are absolutely changing their roadmap. Say we must do this. This is exactly what happened with Android. When they saw the iPhone launch, they're like, we are starting over. We've got to change our entire product roadmap to now be multi-touch in the same way that PCs became GUIs. VR, AR, spatial computing, whatever you want to call it, is now going to have to change to adapt to this interface. And the extraordinary, I still don't think people have grasped it. It's hard to grasp until you see it. I mean, I've read a lot about it, but the ability to look at any object, a tiny object on your screen, and just tap your fingers together to be the gesture it's an first of all, it's just the technology to do it is extraordinary. It's tracking your eye to see that you're focused on a tiny dot on the screen, and it's that
Right.
accurate that you're focused on that you can just tap that and then move it. I have to say,
And I've heard that you don't have to have your hand in a certain place either. You could have it, down by your
oh yeah, it doesn't
knee.
matter. It's
Yeah.
pretty incredible. People like try and grasp the thing in 3 dimensions, and then they realize, wait, they're just looking at it. Their hand can just be sitting by them. And for
Yeah.
me, I have wrist pain, I have arm pain, I have shoulder pain because I started my first mouse click was in 1986, and I've just not stopped since then. I mean, like literally, like I'm in pain from sitting here in this 2-dimensional space. And there's some great articles written about this too. Of course, the mouse enables you to take an object and use a 2-dimensional plane to click in another plane, right? And then multi-touch enabled us to actually touch the object as you know, you're using your iPhone, your iPad. But this enables you to experience the object in 3D, and of course to then, manipulate it and touch it and move it and all that stuff. But it is going to be an extraordinary platform. We're just at the beginning of this, and we haven't really even talked about what happens when you combine it with AI. And
Yeah.
that Apple didn't mention that. Apple mentioned machine learning, and that was not an accident. They didn't mention AI at all because
They didn't mention the metaverse either. It's
yeah,
like
they didn't mention the
took out the
metaverse.
technical terms. They're just
Yeah.
like, you're gonna live your life better, which I
Yeah.
love about how their marketing. They solved a million engineering and design problems and didn't talk about that. They talked about how is this going to improve your life.
Yeah, they did kind of anchor everybody on spatial computing, which is kind of interesting. And I think the reason they did that is a smart one. Is AI is a technology, but what can it do for you in the Vision Pro is really the question. And of course, right now it's text based, so it wouldn't be that really interesting to say, hey, here's text that you're using ChatGPT on a 2-dimensional text browser, and here you are doing it in AR, XR, spatial computing, whatever. That's not that compelling, but the compelling part of it is, again, helping humans, learn, make decisions, gather information, analyze information, to get jobs done, which are going to be done in a 3-dimensional space.
Yeah.
And that's where I think there is the virtual reality part of it, as well as the augmented reality. The augmented reality is just fantastic that they led with that, because we are humans and we are living in the real world, and the goal is to make your real life better in the real world, not to just extract you into this crazy matrix like world that you never come out of.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
I feel that the marketing for every other headset is it's bringing a curtain down around you and taking you out of your real life. Like that's what the metaverse feels like to me, and that's the last thing I want to do. I want to enhance my real life.
Yeah.
And I think Apple did an amazing job of demonstrating that.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because you don't want the Mark Zuckerberg Meta Quest experience, which I don't know if people have seen this, but there was a big conference and he had everybody put on a Mega Quest, so no one's connected. Everybody's sitting there with literally Mark Zuckerberg's walking around, the only person without this thing on. It looked like he is an evil overlord,
right.
Enslaving these people. The irony, if everybody remembers the 1984 Mac ad, which was very famous, with a runner, all these people are staring at a screen blindly, and they're just, the runner comes down with a sledgehammer and smashes the big screen. And, we're not going to, 1984 will not be like 1984. It won't be Big Brother. You'll be liberated. It was a great ad for the original Mac. He replicated that for MetaQuest in a bad, like he's the evil overlord. Right. Everybody is like in his world, like it's
very creepy.
It was so creepy. Yeah. And this was the exact opposite of that. That is why Apple is so good. And we do know that Phil Schiller has said that Apple's grand unified theory is jobs to be done. They ask what jobs can be done by, your Mac, your phone, your watch. Right. And they clearly took that perspective building this. And the other element, just to we can kind of wrap this up here, is I would say the legacy of Steve Jobs is here. Not that Steve Jobs was this lone genius, but that he created this company And the later Steve Jobs was very different than the early Steve Jobs,
Mm-hmm.
where it is a culture of being excruciatingly customer centric. You could just tell Apple is like no other company right now. I mean, of course, it's the most valuable company in the world for a reason, is the collaboration, the teamwork, the number of people who contributed to this. It is extraordinary. It really is the most advanced personal electronic device ever. And the thinking that went into it, the care, the thoughtfulness of how people are going to use this, how they're going to be real humans in the real world, doing real things, having to get jobs done, having to, collaborate and share and work together. It's so thoughtful because it is so customer centric. They of course tout all the technology that goes into it, but first and foremost is a human centric view of what you need to accomplish in your life. What are those goals? And how are you going to get those jobs done, better, faster, and more accurately using a new platform?
Totally agree.
Yeah, great. So there's our prediction. Well, I would say, Jared, are you on board with me that it's going to be the most successful product in history? Yes or no?
Yes. I have reservations on how awesome that will be for my life, but we'll see. I'm hoping it turns out well.
Yeah, me too. I'm very hopeful. So thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe and like to this podcast. If you want to learn more about Jobs to be Done innovation methods, visit us at thrv.com.